Hi, and welcome to Let's Grow. I'm Linda Kelly, Executive Director of Kelly Mental Health Foundation. This show is about talking about mental health issues and spreading information so that we are all more educated, more knowledgeable, and simply more aware of the things that go on around us. We have a very, very special topic today and a special guest. Today we're going to be talking about Parent Alienation Syndrome. So I have a lot of notes with me today, so bear with me. Parent Alienation Syndrome was first recognized in 1985. It's taken years to spread awareness about it, and it is a form of child abuse. It usually occurs when the parental relationship breaks down and one parent uses the child as a weapon to hurt the other parent. Usually to gain custody without the involvement of the other parent, and the abuser does everything in their power to destroy the relationship between their child and the other parent. And this can also extend to include the alienated members of the family. So here with me today, I have Iris McCoy-Slongo, who experienced this firsthand as she witnessed her daughter go through the effects of parent alienation syndrome during her separation and divorce. Hi, Iris.
Hi, Linda.
Now, I know you're very nervous.
A little bit.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to do a little deep breathing while we're talking.
Okay.
I really appreciate you coming on to talk about this. Now, you and I do have a personal relationship.
We do.
Iris is actually my son's grandmother, so I've been very aware of your situation. You've spoken very openly about it. And it's taken a lot of years to, even just for more people to be aware of what this is.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So just so people know who you are, tell us about yourself.
Okay. I'm a mother and a grandmother, very proud grandmother. I'm a charity manager at a local charitable gaming center. I'm currently very happily married. I've been going on 25 years now to a wonderful man. I was previously married. I had 2 children from that marriage, and it ended when my children were 10 and 7.
Okay. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong during a divorce. Mm-hmm. Obviously, especially when kids are involved, you've got tensions running high, a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. That happens, right? It's the breakdown of a relationship. So what I'd like you to do, if you're comfortable, is just to share what your experience was like when you first encountered, or when you went through your divorce. And
Okay. Well, my marriage ended as a result of emotional and physical abuse. My husband was charged with assault and threatening my life. I immediately took my children and we left the home out of fear, and we went to my father's place. He had a 1-bedroom basement apartment. It happened to be empty, so that was going to be my temporary arrangement until, I could get on my feet again and afford a better place. I contacted a lawyer, I got a babysitter for my children, and I went back to work. When my husband was released from jail, he immediately went to the babysitter, took my children, and blocked all access. I contacted the police, but I didn't have an interim custody order, so there was really nothing they could do. Their hands were tied. My lawyer and I then began to petition the courts for interim custody, and that can take time. So it was when we went to court for the first time, my husband had presented an affidavit that, oh my goodness, it was accusing me of being mentally unstable, of being abusive to my children. It was horrific. It was terrible. I didn't expect anything like that, and he petitioned for sole custody. The judge actually reasoned out loud that, well, he's in the home with their furniture, their beds, in the district of the school. He doesn't work. He can care for them all day. On the other hand, she has 2 jobs, moved into a small bedroom apartment, and kids can stay with their dad. So he was given interim custody, and because the judge wasn't sure if I was a danger or not, I was given limited access for 4 hours twice a week.
And this was after he was in prison?
Yes, but there was no conviction, so it was not admissible.
Okay.
Okay,
Wow.
So that takes time, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, my access was limited to 4 hours twice a week. And right from the beginning, my oldest daughter, started exhibiting anger and hatred towards me. She didn't want to see me. She wanted to go back to her dad. It was really difficult. She was, her behavior was like over the top. And the one instance that started the whole, started the whole ball rolling was she was sitting on the floor in front of me and she was poking me and poking me and poking me. And I said, okay, stop. Like, what are you doing? Anyway, it continued until I lost my cool and I reached down and I smacked her with the end of my fingers. Well, little did I know I had fallen into the trap. When I dropped them off that evening, he immediately took them to the hospital, had her assessed for a concussion, and the referral was made to the Children's Aid Society. I lost all contact, and my visitation was halted until an investigation was complete. It takes 2 to 3 weeks to complete an investigation, and I was cleared of all charges, got my children back, but my daughter, the behavior was just brutal. My lawyer urged me to start counseling right away because this was obviously going to be ugly, and I needed to keep my cool. I needed to be able to handle this.
How old was she at the time?
She was 10.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started counseling right away, and that was a lifesaver. It certainly helped me stay focused and keep my cool and all that kind of thing. In the year, our visits were very difficult because she was angry. She didn't want to be there. She didn't want to see me. She made that clear. One visit, she threw her shoe at my head, told me she hated me and never wanted to see me again. And I had to keep my cool, right? So there were 3 more malicious referrals made to the Children's Aid Society in that year. And there was no physical contact at all, so they were 100% malicious. But each time, I was denied my access, denied any contact, until a full investigation took place. All 3 times, by the end of the investigation, I was cleared and access was resumed. The judge at that time ordered the kids needed their own lawyer. He was like, this case is kind of crazy, right? And he wanted the children represented. So they were assigned a lawyer, which was really good. They got to know her. She was a really nice lady.
Was that unusual at the time for them to have their own lawyer?
You know what? I'm not sure. I think it's if there's difficulty, if there's the kids, they don't know which one of us is causing the issues, right?
Okay.
Or both of us. The kids need their own representation, which was a godsend. That was good for them, right? Shoot. Kind of lost my place. Oh, it was, but once the lawyer met with the kids, she recommended to the courts that I be given weekend overnight access. But she also said I might want to just not force my daughter to come because let's get through the courts and everything first. So I did that. I had to. She just was so angry and so hateful towards me. So I stopped insisting she visit, and it was only my younger that came, and we had nice weekends together, waiting for a court date. Then the biggest shock of all was I got a call on a Monday morning from Children's Aid Society that my young son had made accusations that I was abusing him, and it was pretty serious abuse that I was accused of. This time the police were actually involved in the investigation as well. I had to be questioned by a detective, and so did my son. Thankfully, he'd had a little friend sleepover, and that friend actually had to be interviewed as well. And he said he never seen anything bad, and he loved spending time at our house. And, I was cleared again. And the judge this time, well, we actually went, and my lawyer and I went in and requested psychological assessments. Like, it's way getting out of hand, right? This is crazy. And so the judge ordered psychological assessments on all of us.
Okay. So I'm just going to stop you there for just a moment. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll go on to discuss the results of those psych assessments. Stay with us. Welcome back to Let's Grow. I'm Linda Kelly, your host, and I'm here with Iris McCoy-Slongo talking about Parent Alienation Syndrome. So we were just coming up to the point in your story where psychological assessments had been ordered by the court. So tell me about that.
Okay, well, all four of us, all four of us had to go for testing, and it took probably a few months to get that done. Once that was complete, the trial date was set. So when we got to trial, there were, with testimony from 5 CSA workers, because a new one is assigned for each allegation.
Oh my gosh.
And the 2 psychologists, one adult and then the child psychologist, all testified. And that was when I first heard parent alienation syndrome. The child psychologist said that my daughter had the worst case of parent alienation syndrome she'd ever seen.
Wow.
So that was time to learn about what all that was. At the end of about a week and a half long trial, I was granted sole custody and my husband was given supervised access only. He was encouraged to attend counseling, take a parenting course, and then come back to petition for, a broader access, but he chose not to pursue that.
So that when you had heard that term, the parent alienation syndrome, do you know what they based that on? What behaviors? What did they measure? Exactly?
Oh, there's so many tactics. Actually, if I could refer to my notes for a minute, there's so many tactics that a parent will use to alienate a child. So making negative remarks about the other parent, putting them down at every opportunity, obstructing the relationship by coercing or manipulating the child into rejecting that parent,
Right.
Blocking access, not passing on important information to the other parent, health-related messages, gifts, like I experienced all of that. And then making untrue allegations about child abuse. So it's not uncommon for malicious referrals to be made to the Children's Aid Society.
Right. Now, you had mentioned before that you noticed some of these signs happening even before you left the home.
They did happen before. I wasn't aware really what was going on, but thinking back now, outings were always planned when I was at work. So it was, him and the kids, and he was the fun dad who did all the fun stuff. Probably the most heartbreaking was, I think it was for Christmas. He had taken the kids and had family portraits done without me and gave me an 8x10 as a gift. And that was like a real punch in the gut that I wasn't part of that family, right? So, there's things that the undermining starts before. I told them to do something. No, you don't worry about it. You don't have to do that. Just all that kind of undermining even before we separated. But it certainly escalated after.
So a lot of times with abuse in general, we always say it's about power and control.
Absolutely.
So then once you left, it seems like it was the only way to keep that power and control was through the children.
Yes,
Right.
for sure. I remember one incident where I was picking my son up for a visit, and he had something in his hand, and his dad asked what that was, and it was the Mother's Day present that he'd made at school. He was like 7 years old. It was elementary school, right? And he said, nope. And he yelled out, "You save that for when you get a real mother." And my son was heartbroken, just heartbroken. Like, yes, it hurt me, but people don't realize it's hurting the child as well, right? It's heart-wrenching.
That's awful. And so young, I'm 7
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah.
Right? So, and you had mentioned as well that there were some stories where directly it was happening with your daughter, the manipulation.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I know she was like, he would withdraw affection. That was her. That was what worked for her.
Mm-hmm.
If she didn't do his bidding, then he would withdraw affection. And so she would always cave and do what he needed her to do. She would put me down to him because that pleased him. And my son, on the other hand, suffered because he didn't want to play that game. He didn't feel good about it. And he was kind of shunned a little bit because he didn't partake.
There was a story as well you mentioned about toys, like the monster toy or something like that.
Yeah, my son was into Ninja Turtles, and the Ninja Turtle enemies were kind of ugly, grotesque, mutant-looking things, right? And my daughter and my husband used to say, "Oh, that one looks like your mom," right? That's just nasty.
Right. So, it's interesting because I think there's such a big spectrum of how severe this can be.
Absolutely.
Like I said, at every separation and divorce, there's always going to be resentment. There's always going to be bad feelings. Otherwise, you wouldn't be separating.
Yeah. And it's really, really hard. It's, you know, I mean, I've heard this before. You have to ask yourself every day, do you love your child more than you hate your ex? Because you have to keep your personal feelings aside and do what's best for that child. And that can be really challenging. Mm-hmm. It can be.
For sure.
I mean, I was grateful. I was in counseling. I was constantly reminded. I was guided, you know, to do the right thing and in the best interests of my kids. I'm very grateful for that.
Can you talk about just the impact on your daughter in particular? You mentioned the impact. How long do you think it lasted for her?
Oh, years. Absolutely years. There are, the effects can be so severe on children. The guilt. My daughter suffered from extreme guilt after it was all over, and I you know, got her back. They can end up low self-esteem, low self-worth, leading to addictions and substance abuse. It's horrific. The guilt can even lead to self-hate and self-harm. And fortunately, that didn't happen. As soon as I got the kids back, all three of us were in counseling, both independently and together as a family. And my son was cleared actually quite quickly, maybe 6 months of counseling, and they thought he was pretty well adjusted, wasn't having any issues, so he didn't have to go as often, could come if he was struggling. But my daughter, she probably spent about 8 years in counseling because she just recurring struggles, right? Mm-hmm. They can have issues then with relationships, with their partners, with their own children, and definitely with the alienator. So it's a lifelong process then to heal and grow from it after it.
Being, you know, having been a child, we've all been a child. We define ourselves, especially early on, by measuring ourselves against our parents.
Exactly. So if you're telling a child that their parent is horrible and just an awful person, that child knows they're a product of both of you, and then they're going to question, are they evil too? That's not fair. You know, it's a terrible thing to do to your child.
We do see that, unfortunately, a lot with counseling and even just stories about separation and divorce. We see it because a lot of times the resentment is reasonable, but then we can't help it sometimes as parents. You know, your ex does something you don't like and you just happen to mention it in front of the child. Well, that's not necessarily parent alienation syndrome. The syndrome is more defined with the manipulation
and it's intentional.
Intentional.
It's absolutely intentional.
Yeah. At the same time, you can still cause some of the same effects, similar effects, especially the loyalty issues and the trust and self-esteem.
Exactly.
Just by making those comments, by letting your personal feelings, your hatred for the other person, letting that be known in front of the child.
Exactly. But what you have to remember, and we all have to remember, the child deserves to have as healthy as possible a relationship with each parent. It's not our call, right? It's theirs.
That's so hard to live with at times.
It is.
Especially, you know, thinking back to your situation where there was abuse. You know, it would be very easy to consider, I mean, why wouldn't you go and say the same thing about him if he was bad to you?
Yeah,
right?
it's unfortunate. My lawyer and the police officer actually that attended the night of the charges were laid both encouraged me to seek counseling and didn't actually give me much of a choice. You know, I figured I was good, it's all going to be good, but no, became clear really early that nope, I need help with this. This is not something I can handle on my own.
All right, well, we're going to take another short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what to look for if you are encountering parent alienation syndrome and what to do to get support. Welcome back to Let's Grow. I'm Linda Kelly, your host, and I'm here with Iris McCoy-Slongo discussing parent alienation syndrome. So, Iris, we were just talking about how to know if you are actually going through this. You mentioned some tactics that the abuser will use. But if you're a parent going through this situation, I mean, this must have such a huge effect on you.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So, what can you do if you are a parent and this is happening to you, it's happening to your children?
Okay. I'm going to refer to my notes because all of these are really, really important. And number one is stay calm and in control of your own behavior and anger, because it's going to be tough and you need to stay in control. Secure legal representation and lobby for your children to have their own representation. I think that was the turning point for us when the kids were actually, because we can fight back and forth, he said, she said, but once those kids are represented and it's only about their best interest, that's when things started to turn around in our story. Keep a very detailed diary, because the court dates can be months apart, and you have to have an accurate record of dates and times and issues and all those, that's been happening for you. Always make the effort to pick up the child, even if you know it's not going to happen. Don't just throw your hands up and say, okay, because it could come back that you didn't really want to see them anyway. So always make the effort.
So if you're scheduled to see them.
Scheduled to see them, go.
Yeah.
If they're not coming out of the door, you tried, but document it. Always make the effort, right? Seek counseling, and I can't stress that enough. You can't do this on your own. More than likely, it's tough. It is really tough, and you need somebody to help you see clearly, stay grounded, and get through it. It's tough. There's actually a support group on Facebook. It's called the Worldwide Parent Alienation Syndrome. I'm a member of it. Sometimes I have a hard time reading the updates because they're heart-wrenching, some of them. But there's lots, you hear people's stories. It's good to know you're not alone. This happens, and people encourage each other on there. People who have been through it and have some advice will offer it based on like real knowledge. Family and friends, you have to have supports in that respect as well, but sometimes they're going to act emotionally, and they may give you the wrong advice because they're acting with their heart, right, not their head. So as much as you need those supports, professional and people with knowledge of what to expect are really, really beneficial.
Right. That can, and that's a really good point, that some people that are 100% on your side can sometimes fuel the fire.
Yeah, well, maybe you should do this
Right.
to retaliate, and don't. That'll just, yeah. And remember, it's imperative you keep your children's needs first and foremost, and that can be difficult to do because you're angry, you feel wronged, but you got to stop, take yourself out of the equation, and what's best for the kids. And that really takes work. Make an effort to make your visits, phone calls, whatever, positive and nurturing. Don't use them as an opportunity to vent about how you're feeling or whatever. Make it positive and nurturing for the child. They're having a hell of a time too, and they need you to be the positive one. And refrain from making negative comments, as hard as that could be. Refrain from it, because it doesn't help. It's like a tug-of-war with the kids, and their loyalty shouldn't be tested like that. So you just have to refrain from that and stick to the facts, and that you love them, and you'll get through.
It's definitely interesting, because in a situation with divorce, sometimes we imagine that the two people are sort of in the center of the circle, and they are where the focus should be. But when there are children between those two people, it's the children that are in the middle. And so what, with, say, for example, with grief, if the one person that is grieving is going through a lot of pain, they are supposed to direct their grief outward to the next person in the outer circle. And these people go to the outer circle and outer, and so on. So the thing with the children in the middle is they need to be able to grieve and express to the parents, and the parents express outwards, not into them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it was very, when my kids got the counseling they needed, things turned around fairly quickly, because they were able to have a safe place to vent, and heal and learn.
That's so important. And again, I really appreciate you bringing up the the example of the extended family as well, because you also mentioned that they can become alienated from extended family.
Yeah, they can. That was not only me who wasn't allowed to see my children, it was all my family. I have a number of nieces, and my kids were very close to them, and none of them were allowed contact. So that was really tough.
Right.
That was part of the judge's reasoning for giving me custody too, is he knew I would not try to block the external relationships of my kids. I mean, it was tense for a while. My in-laws, ex-in-laws were angry, right? They supported their son, but once, actually when my daughter was diagnosed with cancer, we became close again. They spent time with the kids. My younger one still visits now, and the contact has been resumed with that side of the family, and that's really important.
Wow, but that was years and years later.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So this kind of stuff, like you mentioned, it had a lifelong impact on her. It affected the family for years and years to come. There's sometimes when that happens early on, there's almost no ability to establish a relationship, even as adults later
Right.
on.
I'm just very grateful, that I got probably, I'm going to guess, around 20 years of a very positive relationship with my older daughter before she passed away from cancer. And I still have a very positive relationship with my younger child, and I can't ask for more than that.
And that's a far cry from the situation that you were in and the situation that you see a lot of people on this the Facebook group. You've
Yes.
mentioned that people can become suicidal.
Absolutely.
Very
I
quickly.
did actually, that thought crossed my head once. And it, it's not seriously, but as I can't do this anymore, I don't think I can do this. The pain is horrendous. And I've seen people talk about it on the group, and people come in right away and, coach and mentor them, and you got this, and it'll be okay, we're here for you, and start giving advice. It's a horrendous experience, it is.
I can completely understand that. And, there's a lot of misinformation out there about suicidality, about why people become depressed and feel like there's no way out. But in a situation like this, tensions are running high, emotions are out of control, and you feel helpless, right? And these are your children, and for a lot of people, that is just too close to home. It's not something that
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
can just, when you feel powerless, that's awful.
It is, it's terrible.
Well, I really, really appreciate you coming on the show, talking about this. This is not a subject that gets discussed very often.
No, it needs to be.
It needs to be, and this is a start, so I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.